Welcome to Digicode, the podcast for innovators to contemplate and discuss the innovations of tomorrow. I'm your host, Tarun Donipati, and today we're going to talk about Hadrius and Som Mohapatra. One of the brightest minds at a UVA, Som co-founded QuantBase with Thomas Stewart and got admitted into Y Combinator, where they later pivoted to pursuing Hadrius and the AI compliance space. Since graduating Y Combinator, Hadrius has seen significant growth and is now projected to reach about 10 million ARR by the end of this year, and is providing services for customers collectively managing $2 trillion. So if you want to learn about how to successfully start and grow a startup, this episode is for you. We'll be diving into the beginnings of Som's story, what support structures helped him along the way, what mindset and methodologies he needed to have to grow and manage his startup, and finally, what moments he needed to learn to adapt in order to find the right opportunities for growth. So without further ado, let's Digicode. Som, it's great to have you here, man. It's been such a long time. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, man.
No, of course. I think the last time we talked, I was in college, and you were at the start of Hadrius, just out of college, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's amazing. How have things been? You're in New York now? You're building is the office there? Is the company everything there?
Yeah. So
okay.
We're about 2.5 years old. Got like 25 people on the team. We're growing to like probably 50, 60 by October. So just a lot of hiring, growth, really exciting stuff. Yeah, and we're all in New York.
Wow, that's amazing. How has life been otherwise? Getting to enjoy Yankees games, hopefully, or anything fun in the area?
I mean, honestly, at this stage, it's all just kind of grinding, focusing in on the work. But it's New York, so there's always something fun going on.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for our audience, just to kind of let's give a quick primer. I know the amazing things that you do, but could you just give a quick background on, how things got started? What do you do now? And a quick primer on Hadrius.
Yeah, sure. Appreciate the chance here. So I'm Som. I'm the founder at Hadrius. This is my third company. I started my first one. It was kind of stillborn. My first year at UVA. My second one was an investment firm where I actually met my co-founder in college. Grew it to kind of I'd say mid 8 figures in assets under management. In about 6-7 months, sold it, and then kind of realized that, well, our most expensive software is compliance software, and it all kind of sucks. So we built some stuff in-house, and I'll get into the story later, but that's what got us to start my current company, Hadrius, which is using AI and agents to automate the boring stuff when it comes to SEC and FINRA investment compliance. As I said, we're about 25 people on the team. We're growing to 50 or 60 in the next 4 months, and we've got we're on track to hit 10 million in ARR by the end of the year.
That's amazing, man. I think. For me personally, in all my times I've tried to grow in college, and with all the entrepreneurial questions, you've always been the person that I've went to, and you've always been there to support me. So appreciate you coming on the podcast to help me kick this off. But I heard you're a Richmond kid. You went to Maggie Walker, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Grew up, moved to Richmond when I was like 5 years old, and went elementary, middle, high school, all there. Both of my co-founders are also from Richmond.
Oh, no way. Okay. They also go to Maggie Walker?
No, they one of them's from Fredericksburg originally, one of them's from Spotsylvania originally, but when we started, we all lived in Richmond. One of my co-founders went to UVA, the other went to VCU.
Gotcha. Okay, that's amazing. And in UVA, you studied econ and CS?
That's right.
Okay, gotcha. So, can you tell me a little bit about? I know, like in your time at UVA, how because everything kind of got started there, right? How did UVA kind of help you, foster those entrepreneurial dreams? Were they there already? And what kind of helped when you were at UVA?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I've talked at a few other places about this, but essentially, I wrote my college app to college, pretty much saying that I'm probably going to drop out to start a fintech company. Uh,
That's crazy.
it's funny because that's exactly what ended up happening. My second year, obviously, COVID was going on, so everybody was doing college from home or from the dorm rooms.
Yep.
I took all my classes pass fail and just went hard on figuring out, like, just before I even had an idea, just knowing I'm going to do something. I'm going to figure out some company idea. At the time, I was like, and I still am a huge fan of like every Paul Graham essay imaginable. He's the founder of one of the founders of Y Combinator. So I ended up finding a couple co-founders around that time, and when I wasn't doing schoolwork or whatever, I was working on my second company at the time, which was QuantBase. And then it's kind of funny. My third year, I actually came back to school, and I was going to be an RA. So I had like the pre-semester RA orientation. It's called O Week. And then the day before my kids were supposed to come in, we got funded. We've been raising VC funding over the summer, so we got funded, and I had to send an email out saying, "Hey, folks, I'm actually taking this year off. I'm taking a gap year to see where this company goes." And that gap year has turned into, or it was a gap semester first, which turned into a gap year, which turned into 2, now 3 gap years, maybe even more at this point. And it's hard to imagine going back now.
Yeah. So till date, you haven't graduated college. Is that right?
That's right.
That's amazing, man. That's crazy. That's like the true like Mark Zuckerberg, I guess now it's Som Mohapatra, story. But that's amazing. So I guess like when you were at UVA, you said you got funding. Is that from like, that was before you got into YCOM, or that's after?
Yeah, that's before YC.
Okay.
We raised from pretty much family and friends our first 300K, and actually it's kind of funny. Our very first backer was one of my friends who I joined an investment club at UVA with. And from there, we ended up getting some institutional VCs in, and for our first round, we raised about 500K for our pre-seed.
Wow.
And that was before we had any network whatsoever in YC or in the investment space. And then we only did YC about 5-6 months post fundraise into the journey.
Gotcha. Okay, so interesting. So your story with QuantBase started way before YC. It started what in your like second or third year, you said?
Yep, second year.
Okay. So it started in second year, and you decided to take a break from school to like really build that out. How are you, like, what was that time like when you were building it out? Was it like in your dorm rooms? Did you guys get like the WeWork at the Codebase building, or how did it work?
Yeah, great question. It wasn't a WeWork. It was pretty much like a local WeWork kind of thing in Richmond, about 5 minutes away from where my co-founder and I used to live, called a Gather. And I still remember there's a little we rented one desk, shared the desk. It was about $50 a month, all out in the open. We didn't have our office or anything like that, and we committed to going there every day, right? So I left school. My co-founder, who was a couple years older, one of my co-founders before we met our third one, he quit his job, and so we were all in on this thing, and so this would have been what would have been my third year of college. Most of it I spent in Richmond working on quant-based, just either from home or from like a library near home, or this kind of Richmond co-working space. And then what would have been, I guess that was my first semester of third year, and then what would have been my second semester of my third year, we decided to just move to New York. We realized we were building an investment firm. Like a digital wealth advisory, like a Wealthfront or a Betterment kind of app. And so we decided the density of opportunity here is in New York City. So we decided to just pull up all our roots and move to New York. And it was only, I'd say, so we were there for maybe 3-4 months. Then we got into YC, and so we moved to SF for what would have been the start of my fourth year. And then finally, after YC, we found the idea for Hadrius during the Y Combinator batch, and then we moved back to New York, and it's been about a year and a half, almost 2, since then.
Wow, that's amazing, man. And so, okay, before we move on to your time at Y Combinator, did any like infrastructure, I mean, just for like anyone who's trying to build out a startup in college, did you feel like there were any resources within UVA, whether it was like the local entrepreneurial network, or whether there's like mentors there that helped you refine that idea or bring it into a path, or did it all kind of come internally?
Yeah, so we got really lucky. I met one of my co-founders, the one from UVA, literally in the what was it called? There was an entrepreneurship group me, and I think it's still pretty active. That's how I met my co-founder, and I think that group chat or that group me is now. I know there's at least 2 acquired founders in there that sold their startups for at least 7 figures.
Yeah.
There's a couple, there's now a good number of folks that have gotten into YC since we got in back in 2023. And, it sounds like when we were at UVA, the entrepreneurship kind of network was still just kind of getting started. But I think now it's starting to get pretty healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's amazing. I mean, it's always been such an inspirational group, and I feel there's always like a lot of people coming back in there. Recently I heard like Marty Weiner came back to Charlottesville and is starting to get engaged there. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot I feel that like, college really helps with, and I feel like that was one of the things that connected me with you. I guess, once you stepped away from college, you moved to Richmond, you started working in this gather, and you got into YC. How did you got in with quant-based? Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. And how did that story work? Like, what was your application process like? What was that? I think I remember you put in like a video or a demo that you make, right? And what was that whole application process like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this was actually the third time I applied to YC. The first time was with my first idea. The second time was with Quantbase when my co-founder and I had just met. So before we had revenue, before we had gotten like any sort of regulatory approval. And this was both of our third times applying to YC. And I think what made our application stand out was, one, that we had applied multiple times. Like YC literally says, like applying more than once almost triples your chance to get in. It just, especially if it's with the same idea, it shows consistency and dedication, which, you need a lot of that with a startup, because, things aren't going to look up for most of the early phases. So I think part of it was definitely the consistency. The second piece was revenue. By the time we had applied, we had $200,000 or $300,000 in annual recurring revenue with Quantbase, which nowadays it's almost a given. Like it's hard for me to imagine a startup getting to demo day during YC without 400K AR. When we applied, I think the benchmark for a company was to get to demo day with 150 or 200K AR. So the fact that we were applying with a little bit more than that, I think had our application stand out. And third, I think it was just you're not when you're applying to YC, you're being across like 20, 30K, probably even more applications. And so you need to make your application stand out. It's not the place for narrative essays on like your dream, your, why now, the vision, so on and so forth. It's getting to the details. What's the magic moment for your users? How are you making money? How will you make revenue? How big could this get in as short of a paragraph as possible? Making it punchy, making it direct.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's great advice, man. I mean, and I think I was sitting here thinking, I got rejected for the first YC application that I put, and I'm never getting in. But okay, that gives, I think, me and a lot of other people a lot of hope. So now, I mean, coming into talking a little bit about what you learned in YC, what is that process like? I mean, it's always been a fantasy, to think that I'll be surrounded by a bunch of mentors who are like literally helping me. But like, what do you literally like learn there that helps you take this idea and take a bunch of founders who are maybe experienced just with like business classes in college and make them into enterprise grade founders?
Yeah. The founder, the mentors at YC are world class. Like we literally got one-on-one feedback from folks that were billionaires, had sold their startups that had made 100 million ARR, and so on and so forth. One of the things I think is almost even more important than that is the network itself. The YC's got this internal community called Bookface. It's play on words for Facebook. Imagine like a personal, private, like Twitter or Facebook or what have you, with just startup founders that are grinding, that are like learning these truths about the world, right? Like how to get your first million ARR, how to get your first 10 million, how to do these like super specific tactical things that you don't really get to hear about generally. One of those things for us was how to pivot your company. When we got into YC, we had applied with QuantBase and we'd gotten in. But about a month in, we realized, one, we were the first YC batch after ChatGPT came out. So, this is generational technology. QuantBase is a cool, fast-growing investment, digital investment tech company. But, maybe there's something bigger we can build with AI, right? So, one was we wanted to see maybe this generational AI tech could be useful. Two, we're starting to realize that QuantBase could be the $100 million idea, but maybe not the billion or even $10 billion idea. And three, this was like late 2022 when the market was kind of at a recent all-time low. I'd say recent time low, a local minimum. And so we realized obviously the market's going to go back up, but we didn't want to build a business that was at the behest of the S&P, right? And so all of these, were our inputs. We reached out to folks through this Bookface network. How do we figure out what our next idea should be? So we were actually one of the, part of the majority who applied with some idea and then, and ended YC with a different idea. And I'll loop all this back to say, what was the most valuable part of YC? The mentors were amazing, but it was that network of other people who were trying the same things, trying to build a generational company that ended up being the most valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's. I think for a lot of people who are just wondering what you actually get at YC, I think it's really great to hear you say that. And the resources, they just sound absolutely phenomenal. In terms of the actual lessons, I know you said you read a lot of Paul Graham's essays. Are the lessons that are taught on the basis or the foundation of that, or do the mentors teach off of their own lessons, or is it a mix of everything? I guess I'm trying to understand what is kind of that curriculum or the philosophy of that curriculum at YC based on?
Yeah, I'd say YC is very little of a curriculum and much more of a what might be like a when I need help, I can reach out to our mentors, our mentors to say, hey, what are we doing wrong here, right? And so it's very, very specifically meant to be, 99% of the time, it's just founders working with each other to try to build something cool, to try to build something people want. And then every week, 20-minute meeting with our mentors of here's what we're stuck at. How can we get unblocked? And it's meant to be, and the mentors pretty much ask, well, what have you tried? Why didn't it work? What do you think, can be updated? And I think we found the most useful to be kind of like, what do you call it? Like institutional memory. Like, oh, your problem was something that the founders of Airbnb ran into when they started, in their YC batch, or Dropbox, or Intercom, or so on. So they were useful for institutional memory, for benchmarking. Like, oh, the average YC startup that goes through a batch, gets to 200K ARR. Like that kind of stuff is super, super useful that you can't really get anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's amazing, man. And I think what really resonates, with me with what you said is that there's almost like a structure to the madness, but also like that free flow kind of aspect, in that like you're the one building it out, you're the one doing everything, and they're just kind of there to help contextualize your narrative with almost the broader patterns of what they see.
Exactly.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So coming to, I guess, the more the meat of this episode, you started off with Quantbase, and I listened to one of the podcasts that you recorded during that time, and it seemed like there was a ton of passion from both you and your co-founders, Thomas.
Yep.
I think. Yep. Yeah. So both of you sounded so passionate about we're taking the algorithms that that are out there and giving it to like the people, the retail investors, but you're also like pairing it with like crypto access, with creator investing access. There were so many things which just resonated with a lot of passion. How did that, how did you take that and apply it to Hadrius, which is more in this field of compliance, which a lot of people probably think is a bit boring, right?
Yeah. I love that question. It's really funny. A couple months before we got into YC, we had the should we pivot conversation. So myself, my two co-founders, Thomas and Alan, and I was pretty much like, guys, I love investing, trading, like algorithm building. I'm really good at this. This is a passion of mine. So if we decide to, pivot to something else, like I'll probably, leave and have to kind of just, start my own thing, right? Like I want to stay in this space. But we got into YC, we realized we needed to pivot, or, we wanted to pivot. And I learned something about myself. It's not really the flavor of what we're building that, drives me. It's the momentum, right? And I remember we had found the idea for Hadrius. We talked to several dozens of people about what problems that they had, what were they trying to spend time and money on solving, but still came up short. Compliance was that thing, and specifically SEC compliance. So that's like all your investment companies. And I remember talking to one of my friends who was also had just left college. And the topic was exactly what you asked, right? Like how do you build the passion for something that from the outside seems as as almost boring as compliance? And I pretty much told him, like, yeah, if you had told me 2 years ago I would drop out of school to start a compliance company, I'd be like, what are you talking about? Is really what it is it's solving problems for people. It's making something people want. Our very first customer was this like solo, investment advisor, brick and mortar classic investment advisor, and he was using some like crazy like complex Excel spreadsheet, and we were able to solve his problem for just $200 a month with software. And this guy was like our very first champion. He like posted about us on LinkedIn and stuff, and was like, these guys are doing something really, really cool. Our 15th customer was like, Som, you're selling me this crazy thing. If this does even half of what you guys say it will, you guys are going to be $1 billion company. So it's these kinds of things of making something people want, really, giving them something that like, delights them. That's that momentum. That's what got me obsessed about compliance, and that's what keeps me obsessed about SEC FINRA compliance and about kind of where Hadrius is going.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think it definitely each founder has their own, thing of what drives them. And I think we all think that initially we come in with, the space is what's most important. This is what I've lived in, what I've loved. But what you're saying is that you've mainly been driven by that customer delight, that aspect of being with people and building something that, really makes them happy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's amazing, man. And so, when you, I guess, started trying to get your first customer, your second customer, I think now you guys are doing like 2 trillion, plus dollars of AUM, in business. But, when you guys first started, how did you kind of build that trust with that first customer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what made us pretty lucky was, every single investment advisory firm, like, or broker dealer, like a Robinhood or an M1 Finance, or you name it, like anything where any app or any business you can give your money to manage or trade, they're required to have somebody wear the chief compliance officer hat, the CCO. And so when we were running QuantBase, which was also regulated investment advisory firm, it was me and my 2 co-founders, and we flipped a coin who was going to wear the CCO hat. I got it. And so I was the one interfacing with our regulators. When the SEC came knocking, I was the one talking to them. I was the one buying, compliance software. And so I kind of knew what I was doing, and that definitely helped. When we sold to our first customer, again, he was a solo advisor. He also was wearing his company's CCO hat. And so, our first probably 10, 20, 30 customers were that archetype. They were the kinds of folks that it was the founders wearing the CCO hat, and who could relate to me both on the compliance end, but also on like the founder/business owner end, where they're like, just automate this thing for me so I can focus on what actually matters. And since then, we've kind of gone further and further up market to larger and larger companies that not only have like a dedicated CCO, but sometimes even a dedicated compliance team that can be, tens, dozens, or even hundreds of people.
Wow. Wow. No, that's amazing, man. And I think, what you said is that you kind of started with people who you really understood, right? In a sense that, like, because you were in that space with QuantBase, you've seen that struggle, you really leaned into that kind of customer type as your first customer. How did you make the transition, or how did you like cross the chasm almost, right? When you came from, dealing with people who are, solo advisors, or people with the smaller size, and then your first talk with the CCO of a bigger, advisor. How did that conversation go? Was there any sort of mistrust that came with, doing it your way versus the traditional way?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's always been a little bit of an iterative process, right? Like, when we first started out, we had 5 customers, and people were like, well, how do I trust you if you have only 5 customers? And even today, we've got almost 400 customers. Sometimes that's not even enough for like the biggest firms in the industry. It's always, when we started off, still now, people put their trust in who they're buying from, right? There's that classic slogan of like, people buy from people. Yeah, I mean, like when we started out, people pretty much just put their trust in me. They were like, okay, this guy clearly is obsessed. It sounds like he could even do the CCO job himself, for our company, because, well, he did it for his. And now as I said, we're a team of 25. We've got salespeople that are kind of doing the same thing. So when somebody is buying Hadrius software from Hadrius, from us, they're making that calculation in their head of like, okay, well, I'm buying from this person who I trust to be, like a good operator. One of the heuristics, one of the rule of thumbs we have internally is, for anybody that's customer facing, so our, customer success team, our sales team, our GTM team, they need to be good enough at Hadrius and at their compliance to have a shot at being as good or even better than our customers at their own job. So like, can you be as good at being a CCO than someone that's been in the seat for 10, 15 years. Well, if not, then you've still got to keep learning. And like there's more to strive towards. Because once you get there, it's so much easier to sell the software, because you can literally talk to someone that's been in the seat for however many years and tell them, hey, look, I've talked to 100 people that look like you. Here are the lessons I've learned. And, because I know what this seat entails, well, I have the taste to tell you what matters and what doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that kind of comes into like one of the core lessons that kind of goes into building a company, right? In that you're not really just building a product, but it's almost like you're supporting whatever, taking their workflow and becoming an expert so much that they're able to trust you to just give you that workflow. Is that kind of how you dealt with things?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's amazing, man. What was I guess trying to backtrack just a little bit. What was the status quo before Hadrius? And what were you guys really trying to change in very like simple terms?
Yeah. When we first started Hadrius, AI was a curse word in the compliance world. And compliance was a curse word in Silicon Valley. And so when we first started, I don't think there was, we were super lucky. We didn't really have any competitors that looked like us, that were startups that were, using AI to automate workflows. The biggest incumbents in this space are, 15 years old. They still look like, Windows XP. And, they hadn't really had a need to innovate, because there wasn't any other company like Hadrius, trying to compete with them. It's pretty interesting now, like 2 years later. Compliance is kind of cool now. There's been a bunch of companies that have jumped into not only SEC compliance like I'm doing, but there's like SOC 2. There's all these other kinds of compliance that investors are funding, that smart, young, obsessed founders are looking to automate. Like I literally talked to a friend today that's looking to jump into doing something in mortgage compliance, completely different from anything else that we're working on, that I've seen. And like there's still such a huge world out there to automate. And you mentioned how can you become passionate about a boring, like a boring industry? I think honestly, that's, for the right founder, there's so much opportunity in that. Like obviously people are going to be flocking to like your, foundation model shops, like your OpenAI or your Anthropics or so on. Or like, UVA obviously has a huge like finance community. So like going to your quant places, your private equity, your hedge funds. But I think one of the keys to my team's success has been, when we started Hadrius, we knew we wanted to build not only in a boring industry, but also in a traditionally kind of seen as boring industry, but also we wanted to build for the back and middle office. We wanted to build for like the pieces of these companies that software doesn't typically try to sell to.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was almost like you found this, underserved, area where people don't go because it's boring almost in a sense, in the traditional sense. And you were able to really change and shift the status quo from, being very legacy to being very, very much more modernized. And that's, I guess you would say, your main, value prop.
Exactly. I'd say if there was a Venn diagram in 2023 of like, people that knew compliance and people that knew good software, like the Hadrius team might have been the only team in existence with those qualifications. We were certainly the only ones in our YC batch to have had an idea even remotely similar to what we were working on.
Yeah. That's awesome. So can you tell me a little bit about how the actual product works? I remember a little bit about emails, a little bit about filtering things. But yeah, could you just remind me about how does that Hadrius actually work? What does it do? And how does it create value?
Yeah. So compliance is all about pulling in as much data as possible and monitoring it for, trends, patterns, anything that, could be construed as fraudulent or, like just, unpleasant in general, right? And so we're pulling in emails, we're pulling in, text messages. These are all SEC guidelines and rules that, all client communications need to be archived with some third party, right? Like imagine you're a 500-person firm. One of the people on your team that's advising clients is telling them, hey, like, I just got this hot tip about some random company. You should go buy it. And then like there's emails about that. Well, if the SEC came to that company and said, hey, like I need all your emails. Well, if you're that employee, if you're that advisor, you just delete that email and send the rest, right? So which is why a solution like Hadrius is almost like, or is pretty much required by compliance, but required by the federal, by the SEC. You need to have email stored with a worm compliant third party. Worm means write once, read many. So as soon as that email is sent, it gets sent to Hadrius. Even if it gets edited or or deleted on Gmail, it stays on our servers. And any changes, et cetera, manage an audit trail. So communications like that are important. It's that same idea for like any ads that go out. So whether they're, like Google ads or, social media posts or, so on and so forth. It's that same idea for any trades that an employee makes in their personal accounts or that they make for an employee or for a client. Think about like a vanilla wealth manager that's talking to a household and saying, hey, you should invest X, Y, and Z. So we're pulling all that information in, and you can kind of get a sense of how language models are really, really good at this, right? Status quo, it's the compliance officer that's parsing through hundreds, maybe even thousands of emails and trades and seeing, what might be an issue, right? And now we can offload some of that boring work to LLMs, and the CCO now has the ability to kind of work on a high level, right? Like they can look at, okay, what emails are coming in? What are the issues there? What are the issues with trades coming in? What are the issues with, say, ads coming in or, going out? And then trying to, and becoming pretty much like the data wrangler, right? Like that's surveilling all this stuff at once.
Gotcha. And so the main purpose of the compliance role is essentially to make sure that there's no sort of insider trading or any other types of illegal activity happening in the company.
Exactly.
Right?
Illegal activity, essentially that's, like the SEC and FINRA are both government bodies whose job it is to protect investors, right? So retail investors, folks that might only have a couple $100,000 or even a couple $1,000s to invest. And that's the job of compliance, to protect not only to protect not only the company from SEC fines, but to protect, individual investors from losing their life savings.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that kind of links to, going back to, how you found the passion or the purpose. It really, the overall compliance industry and the way what you're supporting ultimately comes back to supporting people or adding a sense of authenticity or trust to that whole layer of investment. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Gotcha. No, that's amazing. And so, when you were kind of coming back to the actual company building aspect of it, do you feel that your qualities or the way you are as a human being and the values that you follow were kind of embedded into the culture of that company? How did that culture develop overall at Hadrius?
Yeah, I think so. There's a really good book by this guy Ben Horowitz. He's a capitalist, called "What You Do Is Who You Are," and the gist of it is all these companies today have their corporate values, right? But your culture is pretty much, especially as a startup, it's like the stuff that you do, right? As soon as you go, as you build a company from 2 or 3 people, like the founders, up to even 10, even 15, in our case, 25, what becomes really important is the culture. It's, when the founders aren't in the room, what are all the kind of individual people in a team, how are they conducting themselves? And this isn't HR, conduct, but this is, what are the decisions they're making? Are they going to buy the plane ticket that's the cheapest? Or are they going to buy Spirit Airlines, or are they going to buy first class? how are they going to make that decision? You know, what software are they going to like? Are they going to buy the cheap software? Are they going to, you know, build something in house? Are they going to outsource? What kinds of people are they going to hire? That's culture. And I'd say like, for us, the most important, I could list out our kind of 5, you know, cultural traits, but I'd say our most important one is, or the one that's almost unconventional, is optimize for the short term, which is crazy, right? Because like every book out there, every like sage advice tells you, look, like you look for short term profits and your company's going down, right? We're at a stage right now where like, you know, I'm still wearing I'm, you know, one of our chief salespeople. I'm one of our chief product managers. Where, you know, like we're still in the stage of like small decisions about the product are going to matter a bunch in the future. And the way we make those decisions is revenue. Revenue is pretty much the most important thing to our business. We're growing 20 to 30% month over month, and we've been doing so since the start of Hadrius. And you can't do that without, you know, like focusing, you know, what are we going to build that's going to hit our 20% or 30% growth this month? And so what we found is, you know, we're building a company, like we're setting these crazy targets for ourselves on a monthly basis, and we're building the company into one that can actually hit those targets.
Gotcha. And so that's why you say it's because one, it's a function of, you know, how fast you're growing, and two, the nature of sales itself, that you really focus in on optimizing the short term.
Yeah, and like, you know, I think that cultural trait is going to change, and you know, as companies grow, cultural can and do change. You know, like there's a really funny story, like Amazon, like up until there were 100 people, they literally had Home Depot desks as tables. Like they went to Home Depot, or sorry, Home Depot doors. They used doors and fashioned them into tables.
That's insane.
One of the and that's because like one of the cultural traits of Amazon was, and you know, to some extent still is, like the like something about being, you know, like lowest cost for the customer, right? And there's another company out there, I think they're Fog Creek Software. They were a really big company in the early 2000s, and I think they're still around. All of their employees were required to buy first class tickets when they were going on business trips. Well, that's kind of weird. That's an unconventional cultural trait. The reason was these guys were enterprise software. And if you're going to be the kind of sales rep that is, you know, asking for the $10 million deal, you can't be the person that's buying Spirit Airlines and, you know, living in like your, you know, motels. And, you know, that's one of their things that they said, well, these are the kinds of people we want on the team. Here are the kinds of decisions. Here are the kinds of things we want them to ask for.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And I think it really also pairs with the idea that your culture, one is the way you do things, right? In the sense that like whatever initial practices that you start building out become the company culture, because that's how you're solving problems. But it's almost the idea that you build a culture around, you know, what serves your market the best, or like how you really get success in whatever market you're serving. No, absolutely, that makes complete sense. So I guess in terms of, you know, your management style, or the way you know, hire, you know, how does, you know, that the culture kind of reflect into that? Do you try to find people who optimize for the short term, or what are you kind of looking for when you know, hire your employees?
Yeah, hiring wise, I'd say our rule of thumb is, you know, what matters the most is grit and coachability. And so we're just like every startup out there, or like a lot of startups out there, grit matters a bunch to us. How hard can you work? You know, like, are you, it's not just about hours, but it's about the intensity, the obsession of those hours. And one that, you know, I don't really hear talked about that much is coachability. So compliance is a fairly, you know, technical might not be the right word for it, but like you can't come into compliance selling or building compliance software without really knowing the problems to solve here. And so conventional wisdom told us that you want to hire people that are subject matter experts to to sell compliance software. One of the things we found is that's definitely important. I call that like the y-intercept, like how much you already know coming in. But even more important than that is the slope. How quickly can somebody, learn all there is to know and more about an industry or about what it is they're selling. So that coachability piece is something that's really, really important to me. One of the things that I do, especially when we're like hiring people that are from outside the industry, is my first call with them is like a 15-minute screening call. My second call with them, or like if the screening call went well, I send them materials on, here's all the information about our biggest competitor. Now, next call, they pitch me. They try to sell that competitor to me, the competitor's software.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
it is with very little information. And so what I look for is how quickly have you grokked that information on this competitor, on their product. And we've had folks that demonstrate just really, really strong learning. They can learn that stuff really, really quickly, and they've been some of the best contributors to our team.
Wow. And in terms of, the coachability and the grit that kind of comes into play when you're actually, selling, do you feel like, the types of people that you hired when, you guys were 3 people old, is the same type of person that you're hiring now when you're 25, and will be the same kind of person that you hire when you're 50 and 75?
Yeah. I'd say the answer is definitely not. It's kind of funny, like every time we go out and hire, we've got to rebuild our playbooks. It's because like every 3 months, we've, maybe even doubled or tripled revenue. And so we're a different kind of company, like every quarter. And so even if we're hiring every like 3 or 4 months, which is, relatively quick for hiring pace, we just, we're always looking for someone new, right? When we were early on, I think it was useful to find folks that, didn't know anything compliance related, but were really good at maybe founding sales or founding engineering. And now that we grow and mature, maybe it's true that we need folks that have, some gray hairs, right? So that they can go talk to our enterprise clients, or they can build some really specific niche features and so on and so forth.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So, shifting the conversation a little bit to, this idea of growth. I know you mentioned you guys were growing and have been growing about 20 to 30% year over year. Growth is a very abstract concept, right? In the sense that of course it's revenue, but even that sense, it ultimately boils down to certain strategic initiatives that you guys are taking and certain things. So how do you structure growth in your mind? What are the key KPIs that you guys are measuring, and how are you trying to optimize those?
Yeah. So I think there's been there's really good advice here, which is you don't want to overdo it with KPIs and OKRs and all that kind of stuff. We focus on one big number, and it's pretty basic for us. It's revenue. We have different ways we might break that down. So for our sales team, for our marketing team, for our engineers, what are the things you can do on a weekly basis to help us hit our goals? But it's all around that, that high level pie in the sky goal of revenue growth. And your typical company at our stage is doing annual revenue numbers, by the end of this year we're expecting to hit this number, and forecasting towards it. For us, we found that having monthly goals is even more valuable. So and the reason for that is, at least from a GTM side, a go-to-market sales, et cetera side, I found that it's the couple weeks before a goal that people become superhuman. They figure out ways to close deals and generate revenue that they wouldn't have ever figured out before. And so if you got quarterly goals, or let's say quarterly goals, you have 4 goals in a year. So you've got maybe 4 weeks of superhuman, nature, superhuman ability in the team. If you've got monthly goals, that turns into 12 weeks of superhuman nature on the team. And obviously, the more time our team can be superhuman, the more they can punch above their weight.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, I guess one tactic that you're talking about is this monthly goals aspect. Can you talk to me about, a time when, you felt like the team didn't hit a goal? what did you kind of distill that down to? I mean, was it like did you realize it was a people problem and you figured out a way to, talk to the people and remotivate them? Or did you feel like there was something outside, external in the market that you really had to, deal with? Yeah, just talk to me about a time when things didn't go so smoothly.
Yeah. So, we're small enough that like external factors aren't really that important for us, at least just yet. Internally, we've got a rule of thumb, which is sales hits this month's goals, engineering hits next month's goals, and hiring hits the month's goals after that. So if we miss this month's goals, well, there's a few things we can think about. One, well, we can talk to the sales team. Why did we not hit our quota this month? Is it because of leads, close rate, something like that? Like that's where we diagnose. But then we look at the engineering team. What were the things that were on our that were on our docket to be built last month that failed to hit our goals this month? And then finally, who are the kinds of people that we didn't hire 2 months ago that had us fail this month's goals? So now pulling that back, if it's this month, so it's July 26th. Pretty much we're on track to hit our goal. In August, well, we know what our goal is going to be. Sales knows what their goal is going to be. For September, engineers know what they need to be building, what they need to be focused on getting shipped in August so that we hit our goals in September. And what me and my co-founders are thinking about is, well, in October, where do we want the company to be, revenue-wise, so on and so forth? Who needs to be on the team now or in the next month or so to hit our October goals?
Yeah, yeah. No, dude, you're a true operator, man. Operating office, that's insane. No, I mean just the way you're, destructing or the whole problem and then addressing each component and then building it back up is truly inspiring. In terms of the way things are going to go, for the next 1 year, for the next 5, what would you say is the next thing for Hadrius? What do you see in terms of technology? What do you see in terms of your path forward? And what are the things that are going to be the most important for you in the coming years?
Yeah. So we'll have probably a couple really cool announcements soon to pair with like our employee growth. But like we're hoping to hit 10 million ARR by the end of this year. It seems pretty much inevitable that it's happening. Looking forward from there, like I see a path to 30, 40 million ARR by end of next year, and then 100, 150 plus. The year after that. For us, it's all about how quickly can we grow our revenue, how quickly can we serve customers, and just create value, capture some of that value. Technology wise and just market wise, I imagine we're in this SEC FINRA niche, within the kind of securities compliance industry. We're already having customers, global, really large customers asking us, well, can you help us do compliance for our UK entity, our European entities? So expansion on those lines is, almost inevitable. We also have some companies that might have like an investment firm right next to an insurance firm and so on that under their entities that might need, different kinds of compliance, like insurance compliance, public company compliance. We've broken compliance down into like you can call it like it's atomic particles. And I think my bet, the bet for Hadrius is that we can generalize these across the industry. So what Salesforce did to the CRM, we'd like to do for compliance.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And you would say it's one, you're seeing that it's not really a cap on the market. You guys are still small enough that whatever function or the formula that you guys are operating on for growth now can continue to happen. And it's just a matter of going and getting it.
Exactly.
Okay, that's awesome. What do you see is the next step for you? How do you want to evolve as a founder? From now to the Som that you're going to see in 5 years, what are the kind of changes that you want to see in yourself?
Yeah. So I think it really comes down to like, look, the biggest team that I've ever led is 25 people, right? But if we do our jobs right, we'll be 60 by November, maybe 150 by this time next year, maybe many hundreds by this time 2 years from now. And so I think it's just learning how to be like even more than sales, even more than engineering, even more than product, even more than customer success. You know, people say that the hardest job is being a leader, being a manager, like handling people. And so I just got to figure out how to do that.
Truly inspiring. So thank you again, for coming on to the podcast. Really appreciate you always being there to support. And I see you being, up there, one of the big leaders. Congrats again on your RegTech award. And I absolutely am sure that, there's going to be so many more accolades and achievements out there for you. So wishing you all the best and thanks again.
Thank you.
Reflecting on the conversation, I think there's a few key takeaways here. One, a founder's job is to delight his customers. When I think back to the story that Som told about the pivot from doing quant-based to going to Hadrius, I think what I saw was a shift in passion from being passionate about the mechanics or the sector that he was building in to being passionate about just building something that makes people's lives better. And to me, that second mindset seems to be more sustainable and a guiding star for something when you're building something that really matters. 2, sales hits this month's goal, engineering hits next month's goal, and hiring hits the month after that. I think this was a great way to think that Som just laid out when you're managing a company, and it's definitely a great way to keep people accountable and nimble in such a fast-changing environment. 3, the network is the most important resource that a founder can have. Whether it was the YC network that helped advise Som during the quant-based to Hadrius pivot, whether it was the friends and family that invested in Som in his very first round, all the way to that first customer who posted on LinkedIn being a champion for the product, the network that Som built really came into play in shaping the Hadrius journey and being there in those pivotal moments. So as innovators, we're all out there to build things that change people's lives. But it's most important to remember that we need an inner North Star, a mental framework to help get through time, and a network that's there to support us in those pivotal moments of our journey. So with that, thank you for listening, and see you all soon.